off his pal Jimmy Hats. What else could have happened to Hats? So this was about revenge, which was going to be so sweet that the butcher could almost taste it. He could see Junior Magione dying. If the plan worked out tonight, they'd be talking about it in the neighborhood for years. And of course, there were going to be pictures. He was pumped as he hurried across the old rooftops, hoping that nobody on the top floors could hear him and maybe come up for a look or even call the cops. Finally, he made it to the brownstone attached to the social club building. Nobody seemed to know he was up there. So he hunkered down on the roof and caught his breath. He let his heartbeat slow down, but he didn't lose his anger. At Magione? At his father? What the hell difference did it make? As he sat there, Sullivan wondered if maybe he was suicidal at this point in his life, on some level anyway. He had a theory that people who smoked had to be, and assholes who drank and drove too fast, and anybody who got on a motorcycle, or killed his own father and fed him to the fish in Sheepshead Bay. Secretly suicidal, right? Like John Magione, Jr., he'd been a punk all his life. He'd come after the butcher, and now look what was going to happen to him. If the plan worked.
Chapter 98. Surveillance. Waiting. Twiddling our thumbs. It was just like the old days again, and it only half sucked this time. As Sampson and I sat less than 100 yards from the house in Montauk, along the South Fork of Long Island, I was growing more and more enthused about the possibility of taking the butcher down soon. At the same time, I couldn't help thinking that something wasn't right. Maybe I even knew what was wrong. This killer hadn't been caught before. As far as I knew, no one had come close. So why did I think we could bring him down now? Because I was the Dragon Slayer and had succeeded with other killers? Because I used to be the Dragon Slayer? Because in the end life was fair and the killers ought to be caught, especially the one who had murdered my wife? Well, hell no. Life wasn't fair. I'd known that from the moment Maria collapsed, then died in my arms. "You don't think he's going to come back here?" Sampson asked. "Is that what you're thinking about, Sugar? You think he's on the run again? Long gone?" "No, that's not it exactly. This isn't about Sullivan coming here or not. I think maybe he will. I don't know exactly what's bothering me, John. I just feel it's like we're being set up somehow." Sampson screwed up his face. "Set up by who? Set up why?" "Don't know the answer, unfortunately, to either of those reasonable questions." It was a strange gut feeling at this point. Just a feeling, though. One of my famous feelings. Which were often right, but not always. Not every time. As the sun began to go down and it got colder, I watched a couple of insane surfcasters down near the ocean. We could see the water from the woods. The fishermen were dressed in neoprene waders up to their chests, and they were probably going for stripers at this time of year. Their lure bags and gaffs were attached to their waists, and one of them had a crazy-looking miner's lamp strapped onto his Red Sox ball cap. It was very windy, and the windier it got, the better the fishing. Or so I've been told. I had the idea that Sampson and I were fishing too, always fishing for whatever cockamamie evil lurked deep beneath the surface. As I watched the seemingly innocent activity down at the shoreline, one of the fishermen slipped under a wave and then scrambled to recover some of his dignity. That water had to be damn cold. I hoped that didn't happen to Sampson and me tonight. We shouldn't be here like this, but we were. And we were exposed, weren't we? And this killer was one of the best we had ever faced. Maybe the butcher was the best. Chapter 99.
Simple stuff, really. The basic ingredients of a professional murder, committed by a professional. This time out, it was a jug of high-octane gasoline, propane, a stick of dynamite for ignition. Nothing too hard about the prep. But would the plan actually work? That was always the $64,000 question. In a way, it almost seemed like a prank to the butcher. Some stunt that he and Tony Molino and Jimmy Hatz would have tried to pull off in the old days, back in the neighborhood. Get a few crazy yucks out of it, maybe put some chump's eye out with a cherry bomb. Most of life had seemed like that to him. Pranks, stunts, getting revenge for past wrongs. That was what happened with his father, how he came to kill the sick bastard. He didn't like to think about it too much, so he didn't, just closed off the compartment. But one night long ago in Brooklyn, he'd cut the original Butcher of Sligo into little pieces, then fed Kevin Sullivan to the fish in the bay. The rumors were all true. Jimmy Hatz had been out on the boat with him, and so had Tony Molino, the guys he trusted. Tonight wasn't that different in one respect. It was all about getting revenge. Hell, he'd hated Junior Maggioni for 20 years. He took a fire escape down from the roof of the buildings next to the social club. Once he was at street level, he could hear gruff men's voices coming from inside the club. A ball game was playing, Jets in Pittsburgh on ESPN. Maybe the game was why everybody was preoccupied on this cold, overcast Sunday night. Bollinger drops back, Bollinger stays in the pocket. Well, he was in the pocket, too, the Butcher was thinking to himself. Perfect protection for the play, all the time he needed to execute it. And he hated these bastards inside the club. Always had. They'd never really let him inside their little society, not to this day. He'd always been on the outside. He set his highly combustible bomb next to a wooden wall in an alleyway that looked out to the street. Through the alley he spotted a couple of Maggioni soldiers posted across the way. They were leaning against the hood of a black Escalade. He could see them, but they couldn't see him in the darkened alley. He backed away into the alley and took shelter behind a Dempsey dumpster that stunk like rotting fish. An American Airlines jet roared overhead, heading into JFK, making a noise like thunder shaking the sky. The timing was excellent for what came next. The roar of the plane was nothing compared to the ear-splitting explosion against the rear wall of the social club. Then came the screams and cursing of men inside. And fire. Jesus! The flames were dancing out of control in a hurry. The rear door burst open and two soldiers, Maggioni's personal bodyguards, had the boss in their grasp like he was the President of the United States and they were the Secret Service, hurrying him to safety. The bodyguards were bleeding, coughing from the smoke, but they were moving forward, heading toward the boss's Lincoln. They tried to clear smoke from their eyes with their shirt sleeves. Sullivan stepped out from behind the dumpster and said, "Hey there, assholes. You guys suck." He fired 4 shots. The bodyguards fell to the pavement side by side, dead before they hit the cement. The checkered sports jacket of one of them was still on fire. Then he ran up to Junior Maggioni, whose face was cut and burned. He stuck his gun barrel up against Maggioni's cheek. "I remember you when you were just a little kid, Junior. Uptight, spoiled little fuck back then. Nothing's changed, huh? Get in the car or I'll shoot you dead right here in the back alley. Shoot you between the eyes, then cut 'em out, stick 'em in your ears. Get in the car before I lose it." And that's when he showed Junior Maggioni the scalpel. "Get in before I use it."
Chapter 100.
Sullivan drove the mob boss along the familiar streets of Brooklyn, New Utrecht Avenue, then 86th Street, riding in the Don's own car, and loving every minute of this. "Trip down memory lane for me," he gave a running commentary as he proceeded. "Who says you can't go home again? Know who said that, Junior? Ever read any books? You should have. Too late now." He pulled into the Dunkin' Donuts on 86th and transferred Maggioni into the rented Ford Taurus, which was basically a piece of shit, but at least it wouldn't be noticed on the street. Then he put handcuffs on Junior. Tight ones. Police issue. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" Maggioni snarled as the cuffs bit into his wrists. Sullivan wasn't sure what Junior meant. The changing of the cars? The firebombing? The next half hour or so? What? You came after me, remember? You started this whole thing. Tell you what, I'm here to finish it. I should have done this when we were both kids." The Don got red-faced and looked ready to have a major coronary in the car. "You're crazy! You're a lunatic!" he screamed as they pulled out of the lot. Sullivan almost stopped the car in the middle of the street. Was Junior really screaming at him like he was hired help? "Hey, I'm not going to argue with you about the state of my mental health. I'm a contract killer, so presumably I'm a little crazy. I'm supposed to be crazy, right? I killed 58 people so far." "You chop people up into little pieces," said Maggione. "You're a loose cannon, a madman. You killed a friend of mine, remember that?" "I fulfill my contracts on time, every time. Maybe I'm a little too high profile for some tastes, but hold that thought about chopping bodies into little pieces." "The hell are you talking about? You're not that crazy. Nobody's that crazy." Amazing to see how Maggione's mind worked, or didn't work. Still, Junior was a stone-cold killer, so he had to be careful. No mistakes now. "Just so I'm clear on this part," Michael Sullivan said, "we're headed to a pier I know on the Hudson River. Once we get there, I'm going to take some art photos for all your Goomba pals to see. I'm going to give them a clear warning I hope they'll understand about leaving me and my family alone." Then Sullivan put his finger to his lips. "Don't talk anymore," he said. "I'm almost starting to feel a little sorry for you, Junior. And I don't want to feel like that." "What do I care what you feel like?" said Maggione, on account of Sullivan had stuck him in the belly with a switchblade knife, stuck it in to the hilt, then pulled it out slowly. "Just for starters," he said in a weird whispery voice, "I'm just getting warmed up." Then the butcher took a little half bow. "I am that crazy."
Chapter 101. Sampson and I were back inside his car waiting for the butcher to return to the house in Montauk. We were down to counting the minutes. Sooner or later he had to come back. Only it hadn't happened yet, and Sampson and I were tired, cold, and frankly disappointed. A pizza delivery guy from Papa John's showed up at around 7:30, but no Sullivan, no butcher, no relief in sight, and no pizza for us either. "Let's talk about something," said Sampson. "Keep our minds off food, and the cold." "Been thinking about Maria again while I'm sitting here freezing my ass off," I said, as we watched the long-haired pizza guy come and go. The thought had crossed my mind that Sullivan might use a delivery like this to get his wife a message. Had that just happened? Nothing we could do about it. But had it just happened? "Not surprising, sugar," said Sampson. "What happened the last couple months dredged up a lot of the past for me. I figured I'd grieved enough. Maybe not, though. Therapist seems to think not. You had 2 babies to take care of back then. Maybe you were a little too busy to mourn as much as you needed. I remember I used to come over the house some nights. You never seemed to sleep. Working homicide cases, trying to be a daddy. Remember the Bell's palsy? Now that you mention it. I'd had a disconcerting facial twitch for a while after Maria died. A neurologist at Johns Hopkins told me that it might go away or go on for years. It lasted a little more than 2 weeks, and it was kind of an effective tool on the job. Scared the hell out of perps I had to question in the cage. At the time, you wanted to catch Maria's killer so bad, Alex. Then you started obsessing over other murder cases. That's when you became a really good detective, in my opinion anyway. It's when you became focused. How you got to be the Dragon Slayer. I felt like I was in the confessional. John Sampson was my priest. So what was new? I didn't want to think about her all the time, so I guess I had to throw myself into something else. There were the kids and there was work. So did you grieve enough, Alex? This time? Is it over?